Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping right into the boardroom to tackle a systemic issue that literally every major institution faces at some point. I'm talking about bureaucratic friction. Look, if you've ever watched a critical, everyday process grind to an absolute halt for seemingly no reason at all, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So today, we're looking at a highly structured systemic solution to this exact problem, known as the RAAF methodology.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our agenda. We'll be covering 1. The crisis of administrative entropy. 2. What the RAAF actually is. 3. Weighing its costs against legacy. 4. How it stacks up against traditional frameworks. And 5. Exactly how it operates.
Section 1. The crisis of administrative entropy.
First up, we need to establish the baseline problem we're dealing with. This is a terminal, institutional disease that affects all large-scale organizations, honestly, no matter how dedicated their personnel might be. The source material defines this as the axiom of administrative entropy. It basically states that all closed administrative systems naturally degrade over time. The smooth operations you're seeing today, they're just masking the accumulation of latent procedural friction for tomorrow. In other words, efficiency isn't just a steady, permanent state you hit and forget about. It's a position that has to be continuously and actively defended. It's an inevitable law of governance.
Let's bring this to life with a very specific, all-too-familiar scenario. Imagine a standard cross-department disbursement for something critical, like medical supplies. Suddenly, out of nowhere, it stalls. Accounting says the vouchers are incomplete, budget counters saying actually the allocation was adjusted, then Treasury chimes in claiming they have no matching record whatsoever. And just like that, the entire system freezes.
So what happens next? Well, the traditional result is a total cascade of administrative failure. You get tedious manual reconciliation, which wastes time, you get severe delays, you get endless finger-pointing between the different departments, and ultimately, this leads to potential commission on audit findings. The standard approach inevitably spirals into a reactive witch hunt, looking for who to blame rather than actually implementing a structural solution to ensure it never happens again.
Section 2. What is the RAAF? This is exactly where the RAAF methodology enters the picture. Now, RAAF isn't just a temporary consulting fix or some weekend motivational seminar. It's defined as a standard-anchored institutional infrastructure. Think of it like a preventive firewall for your agency. It detects gaps and secures workflows way before these catastrophic failures and bottlenecks can even happen. It saves institutions from massive headache.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core philosophy driving the framework. The RAAF Declaration explicitly states its mission: organize, not control; protect, not accuse; stabilize, not disrupt; preserve institutional memory. It stabilizes complex systems without ever threatening the personnel running them. It's a protective measure, not a punitive one.
Section 3. Weighing costs against institutional legacy.
As with any major operational shift, we have to conduct an objective analysis. The primary trade-off presented in the documents centers entirely around intellectual property. On one hand, you have incredibly strict IP bounds, but on the other, you get the overwhelming advantage of zero-variance stability and a continuous operational legacy.
Let's look at those disadvantages objectively. The legal boundaries are rigid, for sure. An agency adopting RAAF cannot reverse engineer or replicate the system. They absolutely cannot distribute it to third parties or claim any authorship over it. The text makes it very clear the agency is purchasing the results of the system's application, the stability and the structural hardening. They are not acquiring the proprietary system itself.
But here's the thing. That lack of IP ownership is completely eclipsed by what the agency actually gains. The institution receives a total transfer of institutional memory through a document called the Sovereign Protocol Manual. This ensures permanent, audit-ready operational continuity. The agency gets structurally hardened, zero-variance daily administrative systems that protect them day in and day out. It's a total game changer.
Section 4. RAAF versus traditional frameworks.
So the crucial point is how these frameworks compare directly. Traditional models aim to find faults and penalize. RAAF prevents entropy and stabilizes. Traditional methods rely on personnel-heavy surveillance, whereas RAAF uses strict read-only technical diagnostics. Where traditional modes are reactive firefighting, RAAF is standardized and protocol-driven. Finally, traditional ownership leaves agencies dependent on consultants, while RAAF transfers ownership mathematically via that Sovereign Protocol Manual. It literally provides mathematical verification of compliance. If you remember only one thing from this explainer, let it be this core distinction right here. We are fundamentally shifting away from looking for faults in order to punish people. Instead, we're moving toward identifying weaknesses to protect records, strengthen the system, and keep critical services running smoothly for the public.
Section 5. How the framework operates.
For the project managers and agency heads tuning in, this is exactly how the methodology is deployed to transform everyday chaos into rock-solid governance. The framework operates through a rigid sequence of 6 stages: diagnosis, intervention, execution, maintenance, long-term operation, and the final outcome.
Now, what's really interesting here is how that very first step, diagnosis, is handled. Unlike traditional audits that ruthlessly hunt for missing papers or focus on which staff member made a typo, RAAF maps the full process flow using read-only technical diagnostics, zero privacy intrusion, zero blame assigned. This entirely neutralizes that surveillance anxiety that usually paralyzes staff during an audit.
Let's move to how this builds directly into the final outcome: true operational continuity. Because the system is anchored in the Sovereign Protocol Manual and utilizes recursive self-checks to prevent errors from sneaking back in, it remains entirely audit-ready. And this holds true through staff transfers, retirements, and even major leadership changes. The state benefits immensely here, because the framework actually becomes immune to the inevitable turnover of human personnel. Which leaves us with a pretty profound final thought to close out this explainer. Think back to the foundational axiom we discussed earlier, which proves that administrative systems will naturally degrade over time if left without a systemic, mathematical defense. So we really have to ask ourselves, are our traditional, human-dependent governance structures ultimately destined to fail without protective frameworks like this? It's a deep question, and one that challenges the very foundation of how we build and maintain our public institutions. Thanks for joining me to unpack this fascinating methodology.